Hello, welcome back. I hope that you guys are having a great day. Today we're going to get started with our welcoming ritual. How are a lighthouse and a flashlight similar? How are they different? So I want you to think about this for a moment and then tell a friend or family member that's close by. Okay, so there's lots of things you could have said, right? We know that they both give off light. Okay, so that's one way that they're similar. Differences, they help with different things, right? The lighthouse guides ships and boats, and a flashlight will guide us. There's also the size difference, right? One is very large, the other one can be held in someone's hand. So let's keep going. We are going to start off today talking about verbs, specifically state of being verbs, and we talked about that before. These are the verbs that show, that don't show action, but they show a state of being or a condition. So we're going to read the sentences and look at the state of being verbs. First sentence says, the girl and her dog are at the park. So, when we look at this sentence, the state of being verb is are. They are at the park. That is where they are, right? Are at the park. She is happy to be outside. Her state of being is happy to be outside. Her dog is being obedient on the leash. Is being would be our state of being verb. It was storming in the morning, but is a beautiful afternoon. Was stormy, is beautiful afternoon. I am glad it stopped raining. What is the state of being verb there? You should have said am. Great job. So here are a list of state of being verbs. So when we're thinking about state of being verbs, we're thinking about to be, okay? That's what we're focusing on. And there's different versions of to be. There's am, is, are, was, were, be, being, and been. Okay, so when we look at state of being verbs, I want you to look for those words. All right, but back to our comparison. Today we're going to read The Mystery of the Missing Lighthouse, and we're going to compare it to the last text that we read about the creepy creatures. So we're going to go ahead and start going through this. The Carolina Crew, The Mystery of the Missing Light. Chapter 1, Blinded by the Light. Carolina and her parents decided to spend a few nights at a cottage near the Bodie Island Lighthouse. The 170-foot structure is one of only a dozen tall brick lighthouses remaining in the United States. Carolina and her parents usually came here for a few days at least once a year. They loved to take a small sailboat out on the water together. Carolina's mother was always the captain. Her father was the navigator, and she was in charge of the life jackets. All right, let's stop and look at that sentence. Where are the state of being verbs in that sentence? Hopefully you said was. Was is the state of being verb. Her mother was the captain. Her father was the navigator, and she was in charge of the life jackets. The night they arrived, Carolina couldn't sleep. She lay in bed awake, trying to make herself fall asleep. It was warm and cozy in the cottage, and the faint flashing from the lighthouse comforted her. It reminded her of her childhood. She would lie awake and count the seconds between each ray of light. 5 seconds, the same as always. She lay there counting and enjoying the regularity of the light. And then suddenly, there was nothing. There was no more light. She lay with her eyes open, expecting the light to come back to life, but there was nothing. Carolina sprang out of bed and opened the curtain. Something must have happened at the lighthouse. Carolina knew this was dangerous. Boats relied on the light to guide them along the rocky coastline at night. She had to do something. Chapter 2. Help! Carolina was very safety conscious, but she made the decision not to wake her parents to let them know that she was going to slip out of their cottage and cross the dunes to the lighthouse. She wrote them a short note, just in case they awoke, so they wouldn't be alarmed when they didn't find her. She made sure her phone was fully charged, and then left the cottage carrying a flashlight. The dunes finally merged into a grassy field on which the lighthouse stood. It was windier here than it had been at the cottage, and she was glad she put on her hoodie. She hoped that if there were any sailboats on the water, they had dropped their sails to stay safe in the rough waters. There was no light at all near the lighthouse, not even in the lighthouse keeper's house nearby. She reached the lighthouse and knocked on the door. No response. She was just about to make her way to the keeper's house when she heard a muffled voice from within. She listened and waited. There it was again. Faintly, very faintly, she heard someone shout, "Help me!" Chapter 3. There is a light that never goes out. Try as she might, Carolina could not make the door budge. It was definitely locked and was not going to open. She made her way around the building and discovered a small window. She used her flashlight to find something to break the window. She picked up a hefty rock, felt it in her hand, and then hurled it through the window. The shattering of glass sounded amplified in the night. She used her elbow to knock some of the glass out of the window and shouted into the lighthouse. "Hi, my name is Carolina. Are you hurt? Can I help?" A man replied, "I've slipped and hurt my ankle. I think it might be broken. There's a spare key in the door in the house, but I think my wife is asleep with our baby. It looks like the power has been cut. Can you help?" Carolina replied, "Of course. Just stay calm. I'm going to call 911 and wake your wife." Carolina had to bang on the door of that keeper's house for a while before anyone answered. A rather shocked-looking woman opened the door. Carolina introduced herself. She told the woman that she thought her husband was lying in the lighthouse with a broken ankle, but that she'd called 911. Carolina asked if she could have the spare key for the lighthouse. When the ambulance and police arrived, the lighthouse keeper explained how to use the generator to turn the lighthouse light back on. He seemed to be more worried about the lighthouse than his broken ankle. "Please get the light going as soon as you can," he pleaded. "Most of the regular boats in the area use a GPS to help them navigate these days, but the lighthouse has been a helpful reference for sailors for over 100 years. It can help lost boats find their bearings," he explained proudly. When Carolina finally got home, her father was up. He raised his eyebrows as she came into the house sheepishly. After a few seconds of silence, with a trace of a smile on his face, he asked Carolina, "So, what has my shining light been up to this time?" Okay, so we're going to go back and look at the story we read last time, and we're going to compare and contrast these two stories. Okay, so we talked about the mystery of the creepy creatures, and so I'm just going to go through this quickly. So Carolina and Emma are running together on the beach, and they both enjoy running on the beach because it is the beach and they love the sea creatures. And so off in a distance, they spot something mysterious. And upon closer look, they aren't just little black blobs that are moving. They're animals that have been covered by oil. So they're sea creatures and birds that have been covered by an oil spill. And so quickly a crowd begins to gather around this oil spill, and they're talking, and one man speaks up. He's very loud, and he tells everyone that they need to take the birds and bring them to a hairdresser, and he can put all the birds in his truck. But Carolina knows that this is not a good idea. She knows that she needs to wait for the authorities to come, for the policemen and people to take care of the birds. So she speaks up, and she says, in a way that's not rude, she says that they need to wait for the authorities because she actually knows that this is a long procedure and she wants to make sure that these animals stay safe. And so then finally we see at the end that the authorities that show up are really proud of her for speaking up even though she is young. And they talk about her on the news that night, that they're thankful that she followed the guidelines. Okay? So, those are the two stories. What we're going to do is we are going to create, this is from math, but we are going to create a compare and contrast diagram. So let's look at this. We're going to compare and contrast we're going to use a Venn diagram. So if you don't know what a Venn diagram is, you can look right here. Okay. I'm going to make this one a little bit smaller. We're going to do like that. Ooh. Perfect. Okay. So we're going to compare and contrast using a Venn diagram. So just so you guys remember, I'm going to put Venn diagram at the top. We can use lots of different organizers to help us set up comparing and contrasting, but we're going to use this one today. So if you remember, we put our two stories, put our two stories above the circles. Let's try one more time to get this to working right. Oh, well, that one worked. Okay. All right, so we had two mysteries. One was the mystery of the lighthouse. So we have the mystery of the lighthouse. And the other was the mystery of the creepy creatures. So, in this area, we're going to talk about how the creepy creatures is different. So this is the different area. Here we talk about how they are different. Ooh. Sorry, using some cursive there. I believe you guys can read it, but just for the sake of everyone, I'm going to write like that. Different. And over here, we're going to talk about some things that make the mystery of the lighthouse different. And in the middle, we're going to talk about some things that are the same. Okay? Things that are the same in these stories. So, before we begin, I'm going to erase that, and we're going to use words this time. So, let's get started. All right, I want you to think of some things that are the same. We're going to start with same. Okay, so pause the video, take a few moments to think of things by yourself, and write them down, and then we'll start. Okay, so here are some ways that they're the same. They're both at the ocean. They both are talking about solving a problem, right? They're a mystery. So they both talk about solving a problem. Carolina helps in both of these. Carolina cares about safety. You could also say she calls 911. Okay? So those are some of the ways that they're similar. What about different? Let's start with creepy creatures. What's something that's different? Take a moment, write it down, and then we'll go over it together. Okay, one way that they're different is that this one, we talk about sea creatures, right? We're talking about sea creatures in trouble. In this story, Carolina is not alone. She has a friend, Emma. So her friend, Emma, is in the story. Go. Didn't mean to move that. Okay, so she has a friend, Emma, in the story. What else? We could say that there is a disruptive man in this story. Remember that loud man that shouted? Okay. What else? Maybe you said that there were news reporters. She gets her name in the news. Okay, so those are some of the differences. You could have had some more, but those are just a few. And then on this side, the mystery of the lighthouse. So we have a man in trouble. We also have all the boats at sea that are in trouble. Boats at sea. Carolina is with her family. Oh. So Carolina is with her family. She breaks glass to save the man. Okay, so those are just a few. You could definitely have more than that. But we're going to use this graphic organizer to help us create a compare and contrast paragraph. So we're going to look at that and then be done for